Last week in Michigan politics, the race to replace Michigan's term-limited governor gaining its first high-profile Democrat. We sat down one-on-one with the latest person to put her hat in the ring. Plus 13 is on your side with answers. After a water main break last summer that flooded streets and damaged multiple homes, our team combed through hundreds of pages of documents from the city government. As neighbors have expressed frustration with its response, we break down what we found. And drama under the dome. The state Senate Majority Leader threatening potential legal action against the new Republican-led House to get certain bills on the move. Why she says it's necessary and how the House Speaker is responding. I'm Josh Alburtus, and this is your 13 on your side rundown. And we begin with the story that we have been working on for months now. The 13 Help team finally received records requested from the city of Grand Rapids after multiple homes were damaged from a water main break back in June. 13 on your side's Micah Cho combed through hundreds of pages of documents. The documents show how the city handled claims from more than a dozen residents, totaling nearly $1 million in damages.
You're doing nothing for us. We're all still living in chaos. We're all still dealing with everything we have to repair and replace.
8 neighbors who have been impacted by the floodwaters of the June 13 water main break recently sat down with 13 on your side to talk about the impacts of the gushing water flooding their homes and the city's denial of their claims, citing governmental immunity in August. However, on July 10, before a denial letter was sent out to these homeowners, Eric Von Hatten with the city's risk management office sent this email to another city employee saying, "I had a meeting with Mark Washington late Wednesday afternoon regarding the 6/13/24 water main break. It looks like he is going to take advantage of his executive decision-making privileges and pay these claims. Not sure if they will be paid from the claims fund or other fund, that is TBD." The city only had 9 claimants attached to that email with a little more than $498,000 in claims. As of today, 15 neighbors have filed claims totaling almost $1 million. 13 on your side has reached out to the city for comment on an update on the city's response to the break. In a statement, a city spokesperson said, "We cannot comment to the specifics of potential litigation. However, in addition to the city's multiple efforts to engage community partners in relief area, the city has also attempted to engage counsel for the homeowners in meaningful dialogue. The city has requested on several occasions in the last month's legal authority and documentation that would support negotiation. To date, the city has not received a written demand, but remains willing to consider all positions." As for the investigation into what caused the break, these 2 documents give the clearest picture into the city's investigation into it. According to the Ductile Iron Pipe Research Association, who performed an investigation into the 10-foot section of cast iron pipe that burst, there was no corrosion found. The association concluded their letter to the city saying, "While we couldn't find the reason for this break, sometimes because of the rigid nature of the cast iron, it will fail due to unknown stresses or factors." According to Water Systems Manager Wayne Jernberg's September email to city leadership, there have been 68 local water main breaks around the 3rd Ward in 11 years. There have also been 3 water main breaks of pipe 16 inches in diameter or larger since 2013. The June 2024 water main break was 24 inches in diameter. And Vanessa David, who spoke at the 13 on your side roundtable, says she wants every homeowner in Grand Rapids to hear her warning that this could happen to you too.
This could happen in any neighborhood within Grand Rapids, and you're going to submit a claim desperate for any sort of resource or help, and the city is going to deny it.
Micah Cho, 13 on your side.
Out of the hundreds of documents we received, many of them were redacted, making it difficult to answer some questions on the city's handling of the situation. Micah and our help team will continue to look into this and bring you updates as they become available. Michigan Attorney General Dana Nessel is leading the charge on a lawsuit against President Donald Trump's executive order earlier this week attempting to eliminate birthright citizenship. She argues the order is a clear violation of the Constitution. More than 17 states and Washington, D.C. are joining this filing. Birthright citizenship has been protected by the 14th Amendment for more than 150 years. Nessel says this order could harm children and put a financial burden on states, forcing them to modify programs like Medicaid and foster care. Nessel is calling on the court to block the order from taking effect, saying, quote, "This action is unconstitutional and will hurt American families." Now to your voice, your vote. Michigan Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson joining the race for Michigan governor. That election next fall. Benson, of course, joining Republican State Senate Minority Leader Eric Nesbitt and Detroit Mayor Mike Duggan in this race. Benson telling us she believes there's room to build off of some of what's been done under Governor Gretchen Whitmer, but how much of a contrast she may seek to make as this race gets underway remains to be seen.
While Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer has built a reputation as one of the most recognized in the nation, term limits will soon bring an end to her time in the post. And now the race to replace her has garnered its first high-profile Democrat, Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson.
I wanted to be able to do more. I want to continue to expand our efficient services to all of state government.
Elected to the post in 2018, Benson's time as Secretary of State encompassing what she feels was a turnaround for the department.
I've taken our department from being the butt of jokes when I came in with hour-long wait times and the poster child for government inefficiency. It is now a model.
But also encompassing one of the most tumultuous times in modern electoral history, as skepticism swirled over the processes and integrity of recent elections. Benson finding herself the subject of protesters outside her home in the wake of the 2020 election.
I've never been afraid to take on those big fights, to stand up to people who are trying to use their power to hurt others. And that's what you need from a governor in a time like this.
And should she be elected, Benson will be tasked with working with the federal government in the state's interests, including with its new executive, President Donald Trump, whose words Benson has often criticized.
How does the election of President Trump factor into how you would lead Michigan?
Well, a couple of things. First, I'm always willing to work with anyone, anytime, anywhere, who would be an ally and a supporter for making government work better for our citizens. But also, we have to recognize the rhetoric coming out of the White House right now, too. And when it comes to making our residents feel threatened, worried, concerned about their rights or freedoms being taken away or their livelihood, I'll be there every step of the way to stand up to anyone.
Among Benson's plans, she said, paid apprenticeship programs, a paid year of service for Michiganders that would grant investment in higher education or business, and bringing the governor's office in line with public information law, to which the governor's office is not currently subject.
I will, as governor, on day one, voluntarily comply with the Freedom of Information Act. I will order every state agency to do the same.
But as Whitmer will be on her way out of the office, many voters may look to compare and contrast their new choices to the last several years. Having been elected statewide alongside Whitmer and considering her a close ally, we asked the Secretary what difference she may feel would exist between her administration and that of the governor she hopes to replace.
What would you say to a voter about where you feel, if any, a difference lies there?
Well, as governor, my administration will ensure that every day, every decision that we make is made through the lens of how we can make everyone's life a little bit easier.
Do you feel any of that is different from the Whitmer administration?
I'm just focused on the leadership I've been able to provide, which has been focused on government efficiency, getting things done, and transparency. We'll be able to build on a lot of things that the Whitmer administration has done, but do so in a way that is truly listening to people, being responsive, and investing in, among other things, affordable housing for our residents.
And at the state capitol, State Senate Majority Leader Winnie Brinks, a Democrat, has accused House Republicans of violating the state's constitution. Brinks says Speaker of the House Matt Hall has prevented multiple bills from going to Governor Whitmer's desk. Brinks says the bills in question were passed by both the House and Senate in 2023 and 2024. She says police, teachers, and other workers will miss money in their paychecks and retirement without the governor's signature.
both Democrats and Republicans out there who value the work that these folks that are impacted by these bills do, send a message to Speaker Hall that he needs to respect the will of the voters who sent people to the legislature, who took action to support those workers doing those tough and essential jobs, and urge him to present the bills to the governor for her signature.
And we reached out to Speaker Hall when this story aired. He responded later that day with an audio message saying this, in part.
This almost has never happened before, where the prior speaker doesn't file his bills with the governor before he leaves. And so there's just a lot of legal and constitutional questions, and the more we look into it, the more we find. So we're going to do a thorough legal review, but the Senate has no role in telling the House what to do.
Also at the state capitol this week, the Republican-led State House passing a pair of bills that they say would fix upcoming changes to the sick time and minimum wage systems here in Michigan. It's been a big topic of discussion for weeks now in Lansing. As those bills were passed, we talked to one local business owner to get their thoughts on the issue.
This is my passion. This is something that we're extremely proud of.
John O'Connor co-founded Long Road Distillers on Leonard in Grand Rapids. Now with multiple locations and a staff, he says, of roughly 35 employees this time of year.
It's my whole world.
Now, nearly a decade later, he's been watching something very closely.
I mean, I get phone calls and text messages every day asking, what's the update? Where's things at? How's this going to play out?
That something he's watching, debate and a looming deadline. A state Supreme Court ruling out last summer after a lawsuit brought by groups like One Fair Wage is set to make big changes to the state's minimum wage and sick time systems come February. The revived language would change sick time accruals for businesses of certain sizes and phase out the state's tip credit that currently allows employers to only pay tipped employees a percentage of the state minimum wage as long as tips make up the rest.
We've had this on our horizon to say, how do we deal with this? And we still don't have a solution to how we're going to deal with it.
The new language would also raise the minimum wage to nearly $15 an hour in the coming years. He thinks raising the minimum wage is responsible, but eliminating the tip credit is not.
We want to ensure that our employees do make a fair and living wage, but I think this is a solution to a problem that doesn't exist.
But it's not just his business he's concerned about. O'Connor telling us he's also the president of the Michigan Craft Distillers Association.
I represent, in one of my roles as the president of the Michigan Craft Distillers Association, some 40 other businesses that do a similar thing to what we do here at Long Road in Michigan. And I've gotten no feedback from any of my members that they're supportive of the One Fair Wage changes.
On Thursday, the Republican-led House acting on what they feel will be solutions.
The bill has passed.
The Republican-backed plan, passed with bipartisan support and now on its way to the Senate, would raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour in the coming years, but keep the tip credit at 38% for those tipped workers. A Democratic package in the Senate also being put forth with some differences. O'Connor thinks both approaches have some merit and hopes a compromise can be reached to preserve businesses like his. Governor Whitmer has been busy signing legislation. Last week, 70 bills signed into law since January 17th. The legislation ranged from school safety to reproductive options to election law. Taking a look at a few pieces of legislation signed by the governor. Whitmer signed House Bill 5551, amending Michigan election law to prohibit people convicted of certain election-related offenses from serving on the board of state canvassers. Prior to the new law, there was no such restriction. Supporters of the bill pointed out that a felony or election crime disqualifies individuals from being election inspectors, so board members should follow similar criteria. The bill passed along party lines with Democrats in favor of the legislation. Whitmer also signed a range of bills aimed at increasing school safety and student well-being, is what they were aimed to do. House Bills 4095 and 4096 create a standard terminology to be used by police and schools when responding to dangerous situations. This aims to create better communication during times of crisis. Whitmer also signed 2 House bills expanding and renaming the state's School Safety Commission to become the School Safety and Mental Health Commission. The new commission also incorporates a focus on student mental health with resource sharing and other support. All pieces of legislation passed with strong bipartisan support. 2 other pieces of legislation signed by the governor will require that healthcare insurers cover prescribed birth control and allow pharmacists to prescribe it. Bill supporters claim that a shortage of OBGYNs is creating barriers for some women to obtain birth control and birth control prescriptions. The bills passed along party lines with Democrats in favor of the legislation. A complete explanation of every new law signed by Whitmer is available on our website, 13onyourside.com. And Donald Trump's inauguration as president this week marks the end of a long election year at the federal, state, and local levels. We recapped the 2024 election year in a special episode of The Rundown this week. That begins right now. Thanks for watching.
It is great to be in the great state of Michigan.
It was a year of historic twists and turns in the world of politics. Now, as the nation inaugurates a new president and a new state legislature has taken its seats, we're looking at the top 5 storylines from the past year in Michigan politics. I'm Josh Alburtus, and this is your 13 on Your Side Election Year Rundown. We begin at number 5, the campaign trail. Trails, plural, we should say, as key races at every level of government ran right through the swing state of Michigan. Bitter temperatures last winter didn't stop a heated start to election year. A story dominating their early months, deep division within the Michigan Republican Party as to who would lead them.
There are 2 people claiming to be the head of Michigan's Republican Party. Former U.S. Representative Peter Hoekstra is one of them after being selected over the weekend by the Michigan Republican State Committee. That group recently voted to remove GOP Chair Christina Caramo from the seat. Caramo refuses to recognize the vote, saying the meeting was illegally organized. The group supporting Hoekstra also filed a lawsuit on Friday to force Christina Caramo to step down.
New developments regarding the power struggle within the Michigan Republican Party.
Yeah, it now includes a lawsuit filed in Kent County and dueling delegate conventions, one of which will be in Grand Rapids. 13 on Your Side's Veronica Ortega live in the newsroom now. Veronica, this gets more complicated by the day.
Emily J., that's probably why new GOP Chair Pete Hoekstra is now asking a judge to settle it. He has filed a lawsuit in Kent County seeking an injunction against Christina Caramo, who claims she is still the chairwoman of the Michigan GOP. Tuesday, that judge ruled the lawsuit can move forward with hearings scheduled for today and tomorrow. In January, a Michigan GOP committee voted to remove Caramo, which was later recognized as legitimate by the National Republican Party. The RNC then backed Hoekstra, who has also received the endorsement of frontrunner Donald Trump. But Caramo has refused to accept the results, claiming that vote was illegally organized, and the National Party has no authority over the Michigan GOP.
A Kent County judge ruled the state GOP legally ousted its former leader, Christina Caramo, making Peter Hoekstra the official chair.
This is not about me, okay? It's not about Christina. This is about winning in November. Those folks who want to join the Republican Party, who want to help elect Donald Trump as president, help elect a Republican for the Senate, fight for our congressional candidates, fight for the State House. They are welcome to be a part of our efforts.
Christina Caramo is trying to appeal a ruling by a Kent County judge to remove her as the chair of the Michigan GOP party. But just a short time later, the Michigan Court of Appeals denied it.
And with that, the campaign trail was well underway. Despite opposition to both candidates, it looked for months to be a 2020 rematch between President Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump. But the race taking a historic turn in June following the first debate of the general election. It was a switch that would change the course of the entire race and the future of America. A political earthquake shaking even the top tiers of the Democratic Party in the race for president. Current President Joe Biden facing calls to decline the Democratic nomination after Thursday's presidential debate, in which he seemed to have trouble at times finding his message.
With dealing with everything we have to do with, look, if we finally beat Medicare.
Many Republicans using the president's performance as a tool to portray Biden as an inept leader.
It's scary as Americans to see that this guy actually is supposedly leading our country right now.
Many top Democrats, however, circling the wagons, hoping to reassure the public of the president's ability to succeed.
The stakes of this race couldn't be higher, and the only Democrat who's ever beaten Donald Trump is Joe Biden. He is our candidate for November, and he has the best shot to beat him.
You have remained a staunch ally and supporter of his staying in the race. Why is that?
Well, maybe I'm a little old-fashioned. My dad used to remind me all the time, said, you go home with the one who brought you to the dance. I don't turn my back because he had a tough debate, 90-minute debate, and turn my back to the accomplishments of the last 3.5 years.
The race for arguably the most powerful post in the world flipped on its head with just one post to social media. Following President Joe Biden's exit from the presidential race, Vice President Kamala Harris quickly racking up endorsements from a number of top Michigan Democrats.
I am supporting and endorsing her because President Biden supported her yesterday, and he, quite frankly, was the person that got 14 million votes in a Democratic nominating elections throughout the 50 states.
But without Biden at the top of the ticket, his delegates to the party's convention in Chicago next month are up for grabs. Some Republicans already honing in on Harris as a likely choice, though the state party's chair believes their message won't change.
They are part and parcel the same package. If anything, in some of the issues, especially regarding the automobile industry, she's further left than where Joe Biden was.
And the suspicions of who would take up the mantle, of course, did come true, with Kamala Harris officially becoming the Democratic nominee at the party's convention in August. In reaction to the switch, both sides seemingly wasting no time in targeting West Michigan as a key region, the intersection of all important races on the local, state, and federal levels. Rally after rally from those on the ticket and high-profile surrogates peppering the area in the months after as they worked to take this swing region. In this key battleground
state of Michigan.
I think we're going to win. I think we're going to win in Michigan.
It is great to be in the great state of Michigan.
We are a pivotal place, a swing place for the presidential election.
I can't possibly overstate the importance of West Michigan coming out to vote.
Loud with excitement as the Democratic nominee made her second stop to West Michigan in recent weeks, 10 days before Election Day.
Do we believe in the promise of America? And are we ready to fight for it?
In the same arena, he held his first rally after becoming the GOP nominee in July.
We will make America proud again.
To Monday night, when, for the third presidential election in a row, he held his final rally in the Grand Rapids area.
We will make America great again.
We just want to rebuild a good middle class so that people can live the American dream. I think in Michigan we get that more, or I should say Michiganders get that more than most folks.
You take care of workers, you make sure folks can unionize, you make sure folks have money. You know what happens when you do that? the economy grows and businesses soar.
Here in Michigan just last month, Quinnipiac had Harris up by 5 in Michigan. Now, less than a month later, this same pollster saying it's almost flipped. This time, Trump up by 3. Trump besting Harris when it comes to whom respondents felt would be best on issues like the economy, immigration, the conflict in the Middle East, and preserving U.S. democracy. Harris leading on abortion access. Then you take a look at the Senate race. We just saw that first debate this week. This poll was conducted in the days leading up to that, where Democrat Alyssa Slotkin had been up by 5 in Quinnipiac's September poll. It's now tied.
We traveled the state. We've met dozens and dozens and dozens of farmers, and we did something unique. We listened to them.
Guess who else negotiates drug prices? Canada, the UK, pretty much every nation in the world.
All sides gearing up for an election that has promised to be down to the wire. One that will determine the fate of the United States and likely the world, and runs right through this swing state. And while state and national politics can often dominate the conversation, a local county government made headlines repeatedly this last year. Next, we'll take a look at number 4 on our list of top 2024 stories, set right here in the heart of West Michigan. We move on to number 4, the year in Ottawa County government. This Lakeshore County gained national attention both this past year and the year before, after the conservative group Ottawa Impact took control of the county board and instituted sweeping changes. One of those was a story that took months to close. County Health Officer Adeline Hambly fighting to keep her job after an attempt from some commissioners to demote her. In early 2024, Hambly, at long last for her legal team, succeeded.
In Ottawa County, where Health Officer Adeline Hambly is no longer in danger of losing her job. After a 12-hour closed session tonight, the board unanimously voted to drop their termination hearing that started in October. 13 on your side's Micah Cho has the latest from the newsroom. Micah.
Juliet, the board unanimously voted to drop their termination hearing against Hambly. In turn, she's dropping the civil suit that she filed against the board as well. She is also resuming her duties as health officer as if none of this ever really even happened. Now, if the board ever does want to try and fire Hambly, she has an added protection this time that will keep her job a little safer. There will now have to be a separate 3-panel board that will have to decide on her firing, a member chosen by the board, by Hambly, and the third person being their mediator. That will stay in place until January 7th, 2025, when a new board takes over. We talked to Hambly's attorney, Sarah Howard, this evening about the monumental decision that has impacts for not only Hambly, but the people of Ottawa County.
You know, my client has tried multiple times since filing this case to end up at this outcome where she was able to stay in the job that she has as the recognized health officer and do the job as it's meant to be done under the public health code. And we are gratified that this is where we ended up tonight.
Hambly will also have the ability to use outside legal when it comes to having legal questions that are health department related. The county will also be paying for Hambly's attorney fees.
A judge is ordering Ottawa County to pay more than $188,000 for the county health officer's legal fees, officially ending the proceedings in court.
In a ruling issued today, the 20th Circuit Court judge ordered Ottawa County pay for Adeline Hambly's cost to hire an attorney. Hambly has been in a legal fight with the county that all started when commissioners proposed cuts to the health department in Ottawa County last August.
Then commissioners tried to remove Hambly from her position after she opposed those cuts. In February, commissioners dropped the termination hearing and Hambly kept her job.
The county government also going toe-to-toe with its administrator the board had hired as Ottawa Impact took control. John Gibbs, the former Trump-aligned candidate for West Michigan congressional seat, was suddenly hired shortly after his electoral loss, and his absence now leading the county on a hunt for a permanent replacement.
this morning, embattled Ottawa County Administrator John Gibbs set to offer his resignation, potentially ending a tumultuous tenure filled with controversy and legal trouble. It was just a little over a year ago when the new conservative Ottawa Impact Board took over, quickly moving to fire County Administrator John Shea and replace him with Gibbs. After getting hired by Ottawa County in January 2023, Gibbs has been at the center of a number of disputes. Gibbs and the board quickly moved to replace Health Officer Adeline Hambley after many openly criticized her handling of the COVID pandemic. That move led to a wrongful termination lawsuit. Then in October, another lawsuit, this one an ageism lawsuit, claiming Gibbs passed over a more qualified 49-year-old executive aide candidate in favor of 23-year-old Jordan Epperson. And just this month, the board voted to strip Gibbs of his hiring power. That brings us to today's special meeting with the county's agenda saying it will consider complaints against Gibbs as well as an offer of resignation.
Ottawa County is settling a year-long age discrimination lawsuit. Ryan Kimball filed a lawsuit against the county saying they passed him up for a role because of his age. 13 Your Side's Callie Lichter spoke to Kimball's attorney. And Callie, how much was this settlement?
Elena, Ottawa County has to pay $225,000 to Kimball. The lawsuit was filed against former Ottawa County Administrator John Gibbs. Last October, 49-year-old Kimball was a finalist for an executive aide position to Gibbs, but he was passed up for 23-year-old Jordan Epperson. Kimball's attorney says this case caused more than just financial stress. In a statement to 13 on Your Side, Ottawa County Commissioner and Chairperson Joe Moss says in part, the county was aware of alleged comments made by Mr. Gibbs that led the county to believe that it could not successfully defend against the claims of age discrimination. Therefore, it was in the best interest of the county to resolve the matter.
The search for the next Ottawa County Commissioner will have to continue as Jim Lauer from Sparta has withdrawn his name from consideration. He's the second candidate to do so in a week. On Thursday, City Manager James Freed from Port Huron, another top 2 candidate, informed the Ottawa County Board he no longer wished to proceed. Monday morning's withdrawal from consideration for Lauer also came with a letter, part of it reading, quote, members of the incoming board majority began reaching out to me both directly and indirectly to express I would not be given a fair opportunity to succeed in this role. They explained that regardless of my qualifications or efforts, they are committed to terminating or otherwise forcing out whoever is hired. After reading Lauer's statement to the Executive Transition Committee, Board Chair Joe Moss made a statement regarding the withdrawal.
But as we just heard from Jim's statement, he has withdrawn after being intimidated by T-Plus and Bonema. Not because he did not have the proper qualifications to be county administrator, but because he participated in a transparent and public search process by the current board.
Moss called out incoming board member John T-Plus and incumbent member Jacob Bonema. In a statement, Bonema said about Moss's remarks in part, quote, the accusation of intimidation was merely an unfounded opinion of Chairman Moss lacking any factual basis. Unfortunately, this chair and the exclusively OI committee intentionally set these candidates up for failure. He goes on to say, as January approaches, I want to express my gratitude to the candidates for their applications and encourage them to consider reapplying in the future.
And after 2 years of county government under Ottawa Impact leadership, that came to an end as voters in November elected a new board with different non-Ottawa Impact Republican majority. The new majority signaling what they feel will be change.
Rallies like this and packed county commission meetings like this were a common scene in Ottawa County over the last 2 years, as it gained a new local and national reputation as a hotbed for grassroots political involvement.
The Department of Public Health is not fear-mongering.
Much of it tracing back to 2 years ago, when Republican candidates linked to the political action group Ottawa Impact gained a majority on the county commission. But now, a new commission taking the reins.
This board will make decisions based on common sense, fiscal responsibility,
and we will take action for the common good.
OI's two-year control marked by swift and sweeping moves, like changing the county motto and closing its DEI office. But it was also branded by controversy after pushback began. Some in the community protesting moves, including an early 2023 removal of the county administrator and his replacement with a former congressional candidate, as well as an effort to remove the county health officer, one of multiple legal battles for the county. But for the former chair, he believes the last 2 years were marked by positives.
In the last 2 years, we've laid a foundation for the future, starting with abolishing the DEI department and then improving processes inside the county and continuing to work for the people.
A new majority of Republicans not affiliated with Ottawa Impact taking control, electing a new chair, John Teeples, and a new vice chair. That vice chair, Josh Bruger, telling us, compared to the last 2 years and decade as a whole, change is coming.
We don't want to go back. We want to go forward. So that means some different things for different people, for us and for me, and I know for John and his heart. It means building consensus. If we can find some consensus to 8 or 9 on our votes that are contentious, I think that'll be a great success for the county.
But when we spoke with the old chair, he didn't expect much to change.
I think that we'll continue with the business of the people.
2024 also marked the second year of Democrats' historic trifecta of control over the state government. Coming up, we'll take a look at number 3 on our list of top 2024 stories, with a look at what was accomplished and what was left undone. At number 3, this year in the state legislature, as decisions made in Lansing directly affected our communities and people on the ground. People you may know, possibly even yourself as a viewer, impacted by what these lawmakers decide. A first major task for them, passing the state's budget that decides each year where our taxpayer dollars will be spent.
A majority of the members elected and serving having voted therefore, the conference report is adopted.
The gavel coming down early Thursday morning, seemingly ending a months-long and cornerstone project for lawmakers now heading to summer recess, after they managed to pass a new budget for the next year, deciding how the state will spend your taxpayer dollars.
Today is a pivotal day for Michigan. I stand before you with immense pride as we look to celebrate the passage of a smart, fiscally responsible state budget.
A budget of roughly $82.5 billion, which would be the largest budget in state history if signed by Governor Gretchen Whitmer.
Last year, we focused our first budget on transformation, and this year we focused on continuation. We are continuing to build on the historic progress we made last year, and with the passage of this budget in front of us today, together we are building up Michigan.
Investments into the local Grand Rapids area, including millions of dollars for things like the local home for veterans, a solar array in the former Butterworth landfill, and affordable housing. And throughout West Michigan, many local colleges and universities would be set to see slight increases in their state funding. But not everyone is impressed.
The budget was wrong. It was not a transparent process. And I think Senate and House Democrats should be ashamed about the process they use. I couldn't vote for it. And once again, Lansing Democrats have gone on a reckless spending spree with your money.
The proposal eventually passing almost entirely along party lines, with Democrats the driving force and Republicans the primary opposition. Many Republicans railing against education aspects in the proposal, including a 0% increase in per-pupil foundation funding for schools over last year.
And it was just unbelievable that in times when revenues are still fairly decent, the Democrats had to raid the teacher pension fund and also say no more money in terms of permanent increase in the per pupil allowance.
But while Democrats may have been operating on their first state trifecta in roughly 40 years, one may not have known by the way the session ended, not being able to bring their caucus together and stranding a number of priorities in limbo. A historic end to a historic session.
Another year under the Capitol Dome coming to a close, but Michigan's first Democratic trifecta in roughly 4 decades not going quietly.
As Republicans prepare to take control of the State House next month, some blasting what one senator described as
Democrats' lame duck dysfunction.
As the House came to a stop Thursday, the chamber not having enough lawmakers present to do their business, with House Republicans and one House Democrat being no-shows. Bills on things from voting rights to government transparency left on the House floor. And in the Senate,
we faced a choice to come back to work and to do everything we could to get good legislation to the governor's desk that was sponsored by our House colleagues who were not there for us.
So Friday afternoon, 29 hours after their Thursday session had begun, the Senate gavel rang down.
Madam President, I move that the Senate do now adjourn.
In their marathon sessions, senators working to salvage what they could. But for some, that plan amounted to ramming through unchecked bills under the cover of darkness.
It was at 6:30 in the flippin' morning. 20 and a half hours after we started this session. This should be embarrassment for every single person in here to pass these things without having them go through a committee.
But Senate Majority Leader Winnie Brink's confident in the choices made.
We did take the time to understand the policy, to ensure that it was good policy. So, more power to them. They had the constitutional right to do that. However, at the end of the day, it was really just a way to obstruct progress on things that had been already vetted.
And looking back at the last 2-year session as a whole, Brink's contrasting some of the end with what she felt were wins throughout for the people.
Tax fairness, putting more money back in the pockets of working people who just can't pay their bills, record funding for K through 12 education, making sure that we were implementing policies on gun violence prevention that people had been asking for decades.
But struggling to keep a caucus together to the point that business grinds to a halt in the House could raise questions for voters come midterms as to whether Democrats should once again be trusted to control the government.
Does that complicate the message at all when you're trying to convince both your legislative partners and the voters?
I don't think so. I have confidence that we have, in a very difficult time, not just in our state, but nationally. I think even with the difficulties there, we have managed to bring wins home for the people that we serve.
Now, a new legislature has been seated, with Republicans in control of the State House. Late last year, Republicans seemingly wasted no time outlining their priorities for the year ahead.
It became very clear in that entire process that Republicans are officially the party of the working class, working men and women of Michigan.
Many Republicans linking their absence to what they felt was a lack of progress on what they see as fixes to incoming changes to the state's minimum wage and tip credit that some say could cost many service industry workers their jobs.
The tipped wage issue will be one of the first things the House of Representatives works on and passes out of the House.
After talking with the Democratic Senate Majority Leader last week, we now sat down with incoming House Republican floor leader Brian Posthumus. Said to have a large influence over the House agenda, we asked Posthumus about this past session and what to expect now that the State House is set to change hands. An income tax cut, a shifting energy focus, and deregulation of housing construction to combat the housing crisis and prices are all what Posthumus signaled could be possibilities.
So those are the three areas I think we need to focus on from a making Michigan more affordable standpoint.
But just as Democrats were unable to bring enough lawmakers to do business earlier this month, we asked Posthumus the same thing we asked the senator.
Does it complicate your ability to say we'll show up at the table, we'll go to work every day as elected when at the end of the session the caucus was not in the session? Do you feel that complicates or could potentially backfire?
I don't think so at all. I mean, look, we didn't have major asks, right? We wanted to continue the conversation about tipped wages and continue the conversation about road funding without increasing taxes. I don't feel like those are stiff asks, right?
But in a new divided state government where compromise will likely be required, he believes bipartisan opportunities remain.
There are a lot of Democrats across the aisle that I have good relationships with and that I believe we will be able to work on good, solid policy and get things done for the people of Michigan. That's my hope, that's my expectation, and the people of Michigan should expect the same.
The presidential election held the nation's attention for much of the year, but it wasn't always centered on the candidates. After the break, we'll take a look at how election skepticism and a shift in voting shaped the 2024 election in Michigan, as we share number 2 on our list of top 2024 stories. When all was said and done on the campaign trail, at number 2, we find the 2024 election itself. In the lead up to Election Day, skepticism over whether the processes were secure and could be trusted amid such heightened tension, election officials set their offices to work, aiming to grow confidence through transparency.
It was in this room in early 2016 when Ottawa County Clerk Justin Roebuck remembers being faced with an unexpected narrative.
I remember getting questions from the folks who were in the room about whether or not they could trust that the vote was going to be counted accurately.
It's skepticism he says has now been fomenting for years.
It's so important for us as election administrators to be transparent about what we're doing, and for voters to be able to ask questions and get answers and see the process play out for themselves.
So ahead of the election, Roebuck took me through everything a voter needs to know to cast a ballot, including the requirements surrounding photo ID for in-person voting.
And what I can actually do is scan that ID and it will pre-populate in the poll book your voter information.
But for some, the concerns come from what may happen after the polls close. But as Roebuck showed us, it's a system filled with checks, balances.
There always has to be representation from both major political parties in the precinct.
And even metal cages.
They are checking the seal number on this cage device and making sure that nothing's been tampered with overnight.
But what about the ballots?
They're actually going to break a seal that is on this door here, and they're going to remove the voted ballots from this box, essentially, where the tabulator goes. So the voted ballots are sealed in an approved ballot container, and this is an example of one here.
And as to whether the machines could be tampered with,
there's a state seal that's placed on here, and that seal is placed on the equipment during the public logic and accuracy testing for the equipment. So that seal number has to be verified. It's kept in multiple places. As the seal is broken, bipartisan teams are watching that process. It's recorded.
Basically, workers would be able to physically see if the memory of a machine was tampered with in between official processes.
Even the passwords that are required to close the polls, there would be a different set of passwords and a different authentication to clear the totals from this equipment.
But even with these in place, concerns have continued to swirl.
And as the person who's in charge of all of this, who's doing the work day in and day out, and is saying as much as he can about the security of the process, how does that feel to you when we get so much skepticism over the elections these days?
I mean, I think over the past several years, we've seen a growing body of misinformation affecting our communities. And what we want to show through our work is the transparency, the bipartisanship that is involved in this process, the complete openness to the public as far as what is happening here. And it's so important that our public sees those steps that go into the process so that they can trust the process by which they're choosing their government.
And came Election Day, America making a choice that would alter its future forever. President Donald Trump elected to a second term, and here in Michigan, we broke down the results that represented a shift seen across the country. Well, it was tight to be sure, but still there's going to be a winner in one direction or another. And today that was former president and now unofficially president-elect Donald Trump. But it's a pretty simple scenario in most key places compared to 2020 when President Joe Biden managed to win and flipped this state. Vice President Kamala Harris really seemingly underperformed those margins in many areas across the state. And Trump overperformed his own. But in some places there is an interesting dynamic. We we take a look at some of those key battlegrounds that we were watching going into last night. For example, Kent County. Grand Rapids is Kent County, second largest city in the state, Grand Rapids. Here, this was widely seen as a bellwether. Traditionally, Republican, went for Trump in 2016, but then for Joe Biden in 2020. Kamala Harris still managed to pull out a win here in Kent County by about 5%, but not the margin that President Biden did. And on the east side of the state, in places like Oakland County to the north of Detroit and Wayne County with the city center of Detroit, giant pots of Democratic-leaning votes critical to the Democratic base here in Michigan. Traditionally, there she underperformed Biden by larger margins than she did in Kent County. And then something that we were looking at now, if we take it back to West Michigan, Muskegon County on the lakeshore. We talked about this in the lead up to Election Day, how it had voted for a Democrat in every presidential election of the 21st century, but that had been getting smaller and smaller. And in 2020, Biden only won it by about 500 votes. Now you look at these unofficial results from last night, that trend is now over. Former President Donald Trump taking Muskegon County by about 1,000 votes, and with it, the state of Michigan. Politicians aren't the only people who can affect policy in government. After the break, we'll take a look at number 1 on our list of top 2024 stories where citizens rallied for change across the state. And we're down to the number 1 storyline of the year. Throughout this year, as those in places of high power were making their own moves, they weren't the only ones shaping the history of our state. In fact, the efforts of everyday citizens were often seen having a large influence on what changes were made in Lansing. That's why at number 1, we have the movements and causes supported by those very members of the public. One example of that came from many Michigan first responders who took their deep concerns over the state of their work to the Capitol.
Today is our day to stand united. It's our day to have our voices heard.
Hundreds of voices, it seemed, as firefighters and their allies gathered at the steps of the state capitol on Tuesday to push for what they believe is an immediate issue.
Firefighter staffing isn't just about our firefighters, it's also about our resident safety. We're out there to protect life and property, and we can't do that without the proper staffing.
These rally-goers pushing for the House to immediately take up a bill currently sitting on the floor that would make minimum staffing levels a topic that employers must discuss if it comes up at the bargaining table with certain public employees, like many firefighters, that can bargain their contracts.
Right now, we can sit down and say we want to talk about staffing, and they can just say, no, we're not talking about staffing. This would make it so that they can't do that.
Back in May, the state's firefighter union president told 13 on Your Side there were about 50 firefighters for every 100,000 people in the state. In many neighboring states, he said at the time, that rate was at least doubled.
This is an easy one. Your right to be secure and be safe and know somebody's there that has your back is basic and essential, and you have a right to fight for it at the bargaining table.
While the bill has since been narrowed, when lawmakers heard testimony last year, some were not on board with the idea in the original bill, saying in part that it would do away with cities' abilities to reduce staffing during economic downturns.
If firefighter safety is the issue, there is a better way. Offer incentives or impose requirements for safe staffing in various circumstances. Tie them to widely recognized standards by accrediting agencies. Also make them incident specific.
Reforming Michigan's no-fault auto law has also been a focus of advocates and victims since those with catastrophic injuries, many of them lost coverage during a 2019 update. Crash survivors, home care providers, and advocates have gathered in Lansing multiple times this year to demand reform. Michigan's no-fault insurance law began in 1973 making it so that anyone involved in a crash would have to file claims with their own insurance provider, regardless of who caused the crash. The law was amended in 1978, providing unlimited medical coverage for people severely injured in a crash. The 2019 changes removed unlimited medical care and cut in-home medical worker pay by about 45%. Critics of the change say this means crash victims no longer receive adequate in-home care for severe or permanent injuries. Supporters of the reform say the fee schedule reins in overcharging from medical providers and keeps auto insurance rates low. 13 on Your Side's Lauren Baker spoke with 2 crash survivors about their experience with the changes to the law.
It's a love story that's been years in the making.
He makes me laugh all the time.
Carrie Ann Sepla and Jeremy Blocher worked together more than 15 years ago and went their separate ways. But a year ago, while on the dance floor...
Wonderful. Yes, wonderful, but...
exceptional, amazing.
Positive and upbeat.
These two locked eyes, sparked up a conversation, and started a new chapter together. But what they didn't know is that new chapter...
I wouldn't want to be going through this with anybody else.
...would test their ability to go through trials together. In October, while riding on a motorcycle celebrating their 1-year anniversary, the two were injured in a crash near Sparta. Both were hospitalized, Carrie Ann losing part of her leg, Jeremy also wheelchair bound.
There are days when I pray to God, and there are days when I weep, and there are days when I scream.
But they say the physical recovery hasn't been the most frustrating part. It's been working with insurance companies. They say because of the 2019 changes to no-fault insurance, their insurance and the other driver's insurance haven't covered the care or housing they need.
I feel like I've kind of exhausted all of the resources.
Their nurse case manager, Ashley White, and Brian Harrison with AdvisaCare say medical agencies have also struggled to help them and other clients because of the cuts made from the law change.
It's not that we don't want to do the work. It's not that we can't work to find the people. It's that truly we don't have the overhead or the pockets to sustain it, unfortunately.
Both say changes need to be made at the state level, and that could happen. State Representative Julie Rogers, along with State Senator Sarah Anthony and Mary Kavanaugh, have introduced bills in their respective houses that can make changes to no-fault insurance.
The 3 bills together, again, it would revise the fee schedule, and then it would change how that utilization review process is done so that it's more an individualized case-by-case rather than a carte blanche 20-visit cap.
Rogers says the bills have bipartisan support and could pass in the lame duck session before the year ends. And if it does, it could help people like Blocher and Sepla get the help they need.
Well, we're hoping that eventually there's light at the end of the tunnel. We're hoping eventually our life can continue together.
And even as we move into 2025, some of those movements continue on. As concerns over tipped wage and sick leave changes dominated conversations among many service workers in the second half of 2024, many showed up at the state capitol to push lawmakers for change. That action bled into the next year, with legislation on the topic being the first out of the new House under Republican control.
There is a looming cliff our state is racing toward. That so-called cliff, February 21st, when a summer ruling from the Michigan Supreme Court is set to take effect. So it's the job of this committee to act. Last year's ruling saying the decision by the legislature in 2018 to adopt and then change ballot initiatives addressing both the minimum wage and sick time was unconstitutional. It ordered the original language be reinstated with inflation adjustment. This meant increasing the state's minimum wage to roughly $15 an hour by 2028, changing sick time for businesses of certain sizes, and phasing out the state's tip credit, which allows employers to pay tipped workers 38% of the minimum wage and only pay more if tips don't make up the rest.
If this passes, so many people lose way more than everybody is considering.
After the first 2 hearings of the House's new Select Committee on Protecting Michigan Employees and Small Businesses, as it was named, the bill is reported as
substitute H1.
Members pushing legislation to the full House after hearing from worker after worker. Some fear having employers pay the full wage would raise costs and cost jobs.
Putting these new policies into effect will break many of us. Good, hardworking people will lose their jobs. Doors will close, and all for something that we didn't ask for.
But some think the law revived by the court should be allowed to stay.
We believe that tipped workers, like every other worker, deserve to have our wages paid for by our employers and not by our customers.
Lawmakers getting to work to come up with what they feel would be solutions. In the new Republican-controlled House, 2 bills that would amend which sized businesses need to provide expanded sick time, raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour by 2029, and keep the tip credit at 38%.
Small businesses, startups, these are significant expenses that can literally put them out of business.
Both bills now on to the full House. And in the Democratic-controlled Senate, a number of proposals. Senator Kevin Hertel authoring the bill regarding the minimum wage side of the debate, proposing a $15 an hour wage by 2027, and keeping the tip credit, but raising it to 60% over the next decade.
We realize that we can do both things. We can remain a tip wage policy here in the state of Michigan, but also increase that tip wage to make sure that folks are getting the resources that they deserve to support themselves, to support their families.
And that's the rundown for your year in Michigan politics. As always, be sure to keep up with all the top political stories as they happen right here on 13 on Your Side.